Britain's economic plan is working.
George Osborne will this week deliver his penultimate budget before the 2015 general election, against a much better economic backdrop than in recent years. Growth has exceeded forecasts and borrowing is falling. But it's not all good news for the UK Chancellor. There are concerns about the scope for growth in the future and the possibility of more spending cuts and tax increases in the next Parliament. Joining me to talk about what to expect from this year's budget is our City Editor, Jonathan Guthrie, and our Personal Finance Editor, Jonathan Eley. Jonathan, the Chancellor said he's going to prioritise business and exports in this budget. What can he do?
Well, one of the things that the Chancellor has been good at is finding money for tax cuts, which are always popular in the City, despite his very tight fiscal framework. So we've seen corporation tax come down to 21% this year from 26%. So obviously business will be hoping for more, probably not around corporation tax, possibly around taking a tier of workers out of NIC employers' contributions, which would be the same thing really. It would be helpful to them and also could be presented as helping young people. Also, maybe something around exports. There's a lot of speculation about that. And of course, there's potential there to work with guarantees, which look, on the face of it, a rather costless sort of measure for the Treasury, following on from the popularity of the Help to Buy scheme for residential property.
Yes, and I was just bringing the personal finance aspect in, Jonathan. The big debate ahead of the budget has been where you've had lots of backbench Conservative Tory grandees saying you've got to stop just helping poor people by raising the personal allowance, the bit of income tax you don't pay. And there's been so many people being dragged into the 40% higher rate that this is not really a Conservative budget. What's going to be the outcome here?
That's very true. The debate prior to this budget was all about the higher rate versus the lower rate. As you correctly say, the personal allowance has been raised progressively from just over £6,000 to it will become £10,000 in April. We already know that. It seems, based on what we've heard so far, that there will be more increases in the personal
and that's
allowance.
faster than inflation. So
yes, that's well above the rate of inflation, and the Chancellor has offset the cost of that, which is very considerable when you multiply those increases by 30 million people in employment, by either freezing or allowing the basic rate limit, which is the amount you can earn before you start to pay tax at the higher rate. That has risen much less than inflation. Fiscal drag in action, many more people now paying tax at 40%, in addition to losing their child benefit and having to pay for their children's university education and so on.
And the Chancellor says, well, this isn't entirely, he wouldn't disagree with your figures, but he would say that some of the complaints aren't entirely fair because people who are higher rate taxpayers, they've benefited from the rise in the personal allowance as well. Is he talking sense there?
Yes and no. They have benefited from a rise in the personal allowance because, of course, all taxpayers do. But for very high earners, those earning more than £100,000 a year, the personal allowance tapers off anyway once you start earning £100,000. And then, of course, over £150,000, there is an additional rate of taxation, 45% now. It was reduced in the last budget. But still, the people at the very top are actually paying more. And I think that's a concern of industry, is that sort of ever greater proportions of income tax are now paid by an ever shrinking portion of people at the very top.
And I want to ask you, both of you, a question about housing, essentially. This is one of the areas where there's huge political pressure, both to increase the supply of housing and also the affordability of housing. Is there anything he can do on this front?
Well, he's already weighed in with the Help to Buy scheme, and we've seen that extended. Obviously, that's been very popular with business.
And are the house builders, do they like the announcement at the weekend that
yes,
the first bit of Help to Buy for new build properties
yes,
is going to be extended?
Yes, they love that. It's bolstered house builders' share prices very strongly, and also had the same effect for estate agents. We've seen some very successful IPOs off the back of that.
And Jonathan, for the household in Britain, what can be done to make housing both more affordable?
The other thing I think that he may have some scope to do is to look again at stamp duty, in particular the £250,000 threshold at which the 3% rate of stamp duty begins. He could increase that to say £275,000 or £300,000, and he could perhaps finance that increase by doing something at the very top end. Lots of pressure from the Liberal Democrats who want mansion taxes, who want more taxes on the very wealthy.
Chris, question for you. How do you think the government's finances are going to look when George Osborne sits down and the catcalling starts after the budget statement?
My prediction is that the government finances will look better across the piece, so there'll still be a surplus by 2018, 2019, the final year in the forecast. But if you look into the real details, the underlying budget deficit or public finances will look no better, might even look slightly worse. And so it's very important not to just go with the headline measures. Well, that's our predictions. The truth will come out on 12:30 on Wednesday. Thank you very much, Jonathan and Jonathan.